Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to just quickly give an overview as to what we are trying to do and make some positive changes. Throughout my career in state government, I have witnessed the benefit of gathering information and being able to take a deliberative approach to not only making public policy, but also making legislation. Many times we've been able to take a look at what's good intentions, but also then in the end realize that there were some things that we should have taken into consideration before putting something into law, and then we have to take a couple steps back. So the goal of this is to make sure that we have all information necessary before we move forward. And while harassment should not and cannot be tolerated in the workplace, we need to examine the laws, regulations, and policies that we already have in place. And that was a lot of my questions that were today as to what do we have and why do we have it. And as we've heard from many of the testifiers, we have many things to corral and many things to take a look at. So with many of my colleagues, I'm proud to sponsor the resolution creating a task force on harassment of sexual misconduct in the workplace. This task force would operate in the same manner as the highly successful Child Protection Task Force, which has resulted in 24 new laws to further safeguard our young people. The Harassment and Sexual Misconduct in the Workplace Task Force would be responsible for conducting a comprehensive review of federal, state, and local laws, the regulations that go with them, and policies to unearth inadequacies and provide feedback on a public report to the General Assembly. And I stress the fact that it would be public and we'd be able to share that with everyone. Members of the task force would include human resource professionals, employers, state agencies, as well as victims and service organizations and attorneys. We would be best served by gathering input from all stakeholders. They are the boots on the ground and have extensive experience in the area of employment. The findings and the recommendations would then allow us to move forward with the most appropriate fashion to tackle the issue. Many times we need things that to work together versus working against each other. So the ability to have a clean slate is the ability to move the issue forward, I think, in the best way. Before we can take action, we need to know where we are and what steps should be taken, and before we do some form of legislation without knowing what we have. And one of those examples that we mentioned earlier, policy versus law, and the example that I had used with the testimony was the issue of even within the legislative branch, we have 3 separate policies on sexual harassment. It's not a legislative issue, it's not a law, but it is our policy. And so the question comes back as to why. Why do we have 3? Why shouldn't we just have one that goes across the entire branch? So that's something, one small example of something that we need to look at. And as a longtime victims advocate, both through my work in the community and as authors of different pieces of legislation, I understand the anger, frustration, and fear that the victims face. We owe it to the victims to remove barriers and make sure that the most appropriate and effective safeguards are in place. And I'm confident that a task force and the evaluation of what we do have in our state government is the best way to fill the holes that are giving perpetrators the power in our workplace. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.